En la historia del deporte, pocos dúos han sido tan exitosos como Michael Jordan y Phil Jackson. 6 campeonatos, una dinastía que redefinió el baloncesto moderno. Pero detrás de cada victoria se tejía una red silenciosa de control, estrategia y manipulación emocional. Una verdad que ni siquiera el propio Jordan, el hombre más competitivo, sagaz y astuto de su generación, tardaría años en descubrir. Todo comenzó a filtrarse tras la publicación del libro The Jordan Rules del periodista Sam Smith. Sus páginas revelaban el rostro oculto de su majestad. Un líder obsesionado con la victoria, capaz de humillar y aplastar psicológicamente a sus propios compañeros en cada entrenamiento. La bomba estalló por completo años después, al descubrirse que una de las principales fuentes detrás del libro era nada menos que Phil Jackson, un movimiento calculado del maestro Zen para fracturar a la gerencia, debilitar su autoridad y fortalecer su dominio sobre los jugadores. El punto de quiebre final llegó tras la conquista del 6º anillo. Jordan movió cielo y tierra para que el dueño del equipo, Jerry Reinsdorf, hiciera lo necesario para retener a Jackson, pero Phil lo rechazó todo. Fue una puñalada silenciosa.
At the end of last season, in our final farewell meeting that we had together as a team in Michael's restaurant, the final note was that the bonds that we've created through these years of winning, we will always hold as a special place, and we release each other at this time to do what they have to do in their lives.
Para Jordan, esa decisión fue un insulto personal, un mensaje claro. La relación había terminado. El resentimiento nunca desapareció. De hecho, años más tarde, durante la ceremonia del Salón de la Fama de 2009, la ausencia de Phil Jackson retumbó como un eco frío, el cierre amargo de una era legendaria.
I was not at his Hall of Fame induction, which some people thought was, a little offbeat for Michael. Totally Michael.
Yes.
Cómo la pareja más legendaria del baloncesto acabó separada por un resentimiento tan profundo que ni siquiera el tiempo pudo curar. A continuación vas a descubrir la historia que nadie te había contado hasta ahora. Todo comenzó en 1987, cuando el gerente general de los Chicago Bulls, Jerry Krause, tomó una decisión poco convencional. En lugar de buscar una figura consolidada dentro del circuito NBA, apostó por un exjugador con ideas místicas, un historial alternativo y una reputación poco ortodoxa. Phil Jackson llegaba desde ligas menores como la CBA y Puerto Rico, con más preguntas que respuestas, y un pasado marcado por su estilo de vida hippie y confesos experimentos con LSD. Pero Krause no buscaba un técnico cualquiera, buscaba un discípulo. Su plan era claro, emparejar a Jackson con el genio táctico Tex Winter, el arquitecto del complejo triángulo ofensivo.
I worked under as an assistant coach. He used to take the summer league team and the free agent team and bring them out to LA when I was in Chicago, and we coached them for 3 weeks. And so in the process of working with him, I learned all the aspects of the triangle offense, which he was a teacher. That was his particular milieu. He was a system basketball coach.
Doc Collins, el entonces entrenador principal, rechazaba por completo ese sistema, manteniendo a Tex al margen de las decisiones importantes del equipo. Esto frustraba a Krause, quien estaba convencido de que el futuro de los Bulls dependía de adoptar ese estilo de juego colectivo. Por eso, impulsó a Jackson a estudiar de cerca a Winter, absorber cada patrón y principio del complicado sistema. Así, en silencio, se empezaba a gestar una nueva mentalidad, una revolución disfrazada de asistente técnico.
Tex had really thought it out. And, I felt like this could really work for us.
Con esa semilla plantada, lo que estaba por venir no solo cambiaría el rumbo de una franquicia, sino que pondría a prueba los límites del ego más grande en la historia del baloncesto. Tras 2 eliminaciones consecutivas a manos de los Bad Boys de Detroit, la directiva de los Bulls llegó a una conclusión dolorosa pero inevitable. El equipo había tocado techo con Doc Collins, a pesar de haber alcanzado por primera vez en 14 años las finales de conferencia. El 7 de julio de 1989, Collins fue despedido, y apenas 3 días después, Phil Jackson asumía oficialmente como nuevo entrenador de los Chicago Bulls.
I remember when Phil was named a coach. The first thing was, it's like, what? Phil Jackson, that's that guy with the coat hanger shoulders and the wild flailing old Nick, and he's not a head coach.
Lo primero que hizo fue lo impensado, desafiar el ego de Michael Jordan. Jackson creía que un verdadero equipo no podía girar en torno a un solo hombre, sin importar cuán brillante fuera.
The initial conversation I had with MJ was, you've been averaging 37, 38 points a game, you've been winning MVP awards, but you're not getting there. And I don't think anybody that won a scoring championship has also won NBA championship, and that's the most important thing, right? Right. So we established that. And then I said, so I want you to realize you're not going to be getting as many touches or taking as many shots. He said, 32 points a game, I can do that and still win the scoring title. That would be no problem for me. I'd take 5 points off my average or whatever, you know. I said, well, that's only 3 or 4 shots, isn't it? Well, he said maybe it's 5 or 6. But
Por eso instauró el triángulo ofensivo, un sistema tan complejo como revolucionario, que obligaba a los 5 jugadores a moverse constantemente, a leer el juego y a compartir el balón.
Well, it's really obvious what was missing. What was missing was a well-rounded offense because we had so many offensive things that ended up with Michael having to do it. We were trying to run a point guard offense, but ultimately we didn't have a point guard. John Paxson was not a point guard because ultimately they could put an Isaiah Thomas on him. They could put someone with quicker speed. We tried different types of point guards. And ultimately, when we got to Detroit, we had to put Michael at point guard because he's the only one that could really bring the ball up the floor. Well, the concept of a system offense is that you have varieties of people that can bring the ball up the court, and we saw Scotty as potentially a person that could be the lead guard in this team. Relieving Michael the pressure of doing that, that was what was ultimately the difference 2 years later when we were able to withstand that kind of pressure you get in big-time series.
I think what happened when Phil came on, he gave us a system to work within. That's when the triangle basically evolved. Up to that point, it was a lot of individual talent.
Triangle offense is a series of options. If the defense does one thing, you can move a different way or go take what the defense gives you. It wasn't rote where you just went A, B, C, D. It might start off at A, but you're going to jump to C.
Was more a philosophy that promoted ball movement and player movement, every guy feeling a part of the offense.
Tex always believed in ball movement, player movement, and that's how you play the game. He don't believe in any individual having the talent to dribble, penetrate, or beat anyone because he just felt like that you were showboating. That was always his words.
Para Jordan, acostumbrado al 1 contra 1 y al control total del ritmo ofensivo, aquello era casi una herejía.
He was basically asking, the best player in the game to take a backseat and maybe put aside some things that he could accomplish personally for the good of the team.
This was like heresy to Michael. He's looking around and he says, I got 4 guys around me. They might not be able to score by themselves in an empty gym. I mean, come on. I remember Michael saying, I'll give it 3 games. If it's not working after then, I'm doing what I want.
The problem was Michael didn't want to run the triangle. He just couldn't understand the value in this. And with the considerable skills he had, you could understand why he might be hesitant.
El proceso no fue inmediato, ni fácil. Jackson y Tex Winter sabían que la plantilla tardaría al menos 2 años en comprender realmente los matices del sistema.
It took a while, a couple of years. It took at least 3 years before we fully understood the system. And Phil was very patient as well as Tex, who implemented it all together and came up with the concept. And it just took some time for us to connect and understand that, each other as a team and act instinctively instead of always knowing exactly a certain play. Systematically, we started to read each other and made it tougher for defense to try to defend.
It's about how to create angles so players mentally saw what the correct angle is to set up a pass, what the correct angle is to set up a reverse. We used to talk about that you had to be a geometrist so that you could move into the best opportunity for organizing an offense. Very basic parts of basketball. Principles of an offense, you have to understand that the sequences all follow one another. And that's how we used it.
Al principio, Jordan lo veía como una amenaza a su dominio.
Well, in all honesty, I didn't really fall in line with the triangle.
He wanted to do a lot of things that he'd done before. He barked at guys to get out of his way.
He'd get in people's faces and tell them they weren't doing the job, or he could come in at halftime and explode in the locker room, and I'd come in and find the locker room chilly, frozen.
He knew Michael had to have his freedom, and Michael knew that Phil had to have the triangle. But in the fourth quarter, you never saw the triangle. Fourth quarter was Michael Jordan. And it worked perfectly.
Pero con el tiempo descubrió algo que cambiaría su perspectiva. El triángulo no lo limitaba, lo liberaba, le abría nuevos espacios, lo protegía físicamente y sobre todo lo hacía más letal.
And it just gave Michael, I think, a lot more opportunities where he didn't have to worry all the time about a triple team or a double team because our spacing in the triangle was good. And I think that gets overlooked a lot.
In the triangle offense, you can move the basketball. It'll find its way back to you. And once that became believable and realistic, then I think Tex felt like he had conquered the greatest player in basketball in terms of believing in his teammates.
Para reforzar ese cambio cultural, Jackson recurrió a métodos poco convencionales. Invitó al psicólogo George Mumford para introducir la meditación y la conciencia plena como parte del día a día.
We talked about mindfulness as being, as much as we pump iron and we run to build our strength up, we need to build our mental strength up. We need to build our mental strength so we can focus, get one-pointed attention, and so that we can be in concert with one another in times of need. Mm-hmm. When you come off the court, you've had a bad call, things going wrong for you, you sit on the bench, you take a breath, and you reset yourself. And you do that through this mindfulness. You just come right back in and collect yourself. So we practiced mindfulness is what you have to do.
So you would literally have the guys sit in stillness.
That's right.
Meditating.
That's right. Taught them how to hold their hands, where their shoulders had to be, the whole process of, being in upright situations so that you're not slouched and you're not going to fall asleep. And they bought into it.
Would you do this before every game? You would do this regularly? You would do this?
We introduced it. And we introduced it in training camp. And then day of games, we started using it. And it ultimately became a process where...
It's like centering yourself.
That's right, just getting back and being centered.
Además, Phil era un fiel estudiante del budismo y las tradiciones indígenas americanas, y eso se evidenciaba en la forma como transmitía calma, control y desapego emocional desde el banquillo, en total contraste con el frenesí de la NBA de aquella época.
One year he gave me Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance.
Phil would be burning sage. Imagine an NBA coach coming through and waving burning sage in your locker room. Imagine him turning out the lights in the film room and saying, okay, everybody, let's work on our breathing.
La gran prueba de fuego llegó en las finales de conferencia de 1990. Una vez más, el rival era Detroit, y esta vez parecía que el sistema de Jackson estaba listo para responder a las temidas Jordan Rules. Pero cuando más lo necesitaban, el destino les dio la espalda. Una migraña brutal dejó a Scottie Pippen fuera de combate justo antes del séptimo partido. Sin su segundo al mando, Jordan luchó solo. Y los Pistons aplastaron a los Bulls en el Palace de Auburn Hills. MJ, consumido por la rabia, se miró al espejo y se prometió a sí mismo que la próxima temporada sería diferente. No solo se convertiría en el mejor jugador, sino que moldearía a sus compañeros a cualquier costo.
His teammates whom we were afraid of him, and there was just fear.
Catch the ball when I throw it to you. I just threw it to you.
Ignore this guy. He's come through, he's overplayed. The fear factor of MJ was so thick.
Yeah, let's not get it wrong. He was an asshole. He was a jerk. He crossed the line numerous times. But as time goes on and you think back about what he was actually trying to accomplish, you're like, yeah, he was a hell of a teammate.
You're playing with the guy that has the highest standards of any basketball player ever. You want to live up to that challenge. It's tough. Tough love. I mean, you got to go out there and do your job.
Go sit your ass down. Game time. That's 9, bitch.
Michael Jordan, decidido a no repetir los errores del año anterior, entrenó con una intensidad desmedida. Cada práctica era una batalla. No solo buscaba elevar su nivel físico, también quería forjar la mentalidad de sus compañeros.
We kind of needed that, you know what I'm saying? I needed him to be the bad guy, the tough guy.
My mentality was to go out and win at any cost. If you don't want to live that regimented mentality, then you don't need to be alongside of me. Because I'm going to ridicule you until you get on the same level with me. And if you don't get on the same level, then it's going to be hell for you.
Lo que vendría después sería más que una revancha. Sería el nacimiento de una nueva mentalidad, de una filosofía compartida, y sin saberlo, el comienzo de una dinastía que marcaría para siempre el juego del baloncesto. La temporada de 1991 trajo consigo más que una oportunidad de redención. Fue la revancha definitiva. Los Bulls, con el triángulo ofensivo funcionando como una máquina perfectamente calibrada, arrasaron con los Bad Boys de Detroit. No solo los vencieron, los aplastaron, barriéndolos 4-0 en una serie cargada de tensión. El punto más polémico llegó al final del último juego, cuando los Pistons, incapaces de digerir la humillación, abandonaron la cancha sin siquiera saludar a sus verdugos. Era el cierre simbólico de una era y el inicio de otra completamente distinta. El siguiente reto fue enfrentar al equipo de Magic Johnson, los imponentes Lakers de Los Ángeles. Chicago tropezó en el primer partido, donde Jordan falló un tiro clave sobre Sam Perkins, que pudo cambiar el destino del encuentro, pero aquello fue solo un ajuste de ritmo. A partir de ese momento, los Bulls se adueñaron por completo de la serie, imponiéndose 4-1 y dejando claro que su momento había llegado. En el quinto juego, con el título al alcance, emergió un viejo fantasma. Bajo presión, Jordan volvió a tomar decisiones individualistas, intentando resolver todo por sí solo. Phil Jackson pidió tiempo muerto, y en un momento de tensión pura, con mirada firme y tono desafiante, cuestionó a su estrella: ¿quién está abierto? Jordan señaló a Paxson, y la orden fue clara, casi violenta: pues pásale la puta pelota.
When they get into the timeout with 6 minutes left, and Phil, people are screaming, and the Lakers are getting back in this game. They're winning that game, and he says, "Who's open?" And he looks at Michael, grabs his, he says, "Who's open, Michael?" And he says, "Paxson." He says, "That's right. Get him the ball."
When, in that game, in the fourth quarter, they started to focus on Michael and the defense, and I said, Michael, just find Paxson. He's gonna. They're all attacking you. And everything, about Michael is that, he takes a challenge and he rises to a challenge. Well, I knew that the challenge is that Michael comes out and has a 40-point game, we win the championship. What a great way to do it. But he had to sacrifice a little bit of that. Just drop it over to Paxson, let Paxson nail those shots. I don't know what he had, 6, 7 shots in a row. It was just something to watch. It was a piece of work, and we were able to just control that game from that point on. But it was a team effort, and he showed exactly what it takes to win a championship, and that is that it has to be a team. It's the way it is.
I think what Phil was trying to express at that time was just that, you don't have to do it all on your own. We're in a position to win this championship. It's Game 5 of the finals. We had won 61 games that year, and other guys had stepped up and contributed. Here's the opportunity to trust the guys around you.
Jordan obedeció. Paxson no falló. Cada disparo convertido fue una confirmación del sistema y del poder mental de su entrenador.
Paxson open again. John Paxson continues to provide the crushing shots.
We set up a middle penetration where Michael actually would pull the defense in, and then he hit Paxson. I think he had 7 out of 8 shots in the fourth quarter. And it set up a perfect ending.
And the Chicago Bulls.
Cuando sonó la bocina final, Jordan se desplomó. Lo vimos abrazar el trofeo entre lágrimas, no como el superhombre invencible que todos imaginaban, sino como alguien que había cruzado un infierno personal de 7 años. El chico que todos acusaban de egoísta había llevado a su equipo al campeonato. Por fin era líder. Y todo, en gran parte, gracias al hombre que lo había forzado a cambiar.
It was an unbelievable feeling. I've been here at the time, I was here for 8 years almost. And, the saying was the Chicago Bulls would never win with the scoring leader. Michael Jordan scored too many points, and, that there's no way that they would be able to win. And, it was gratifying to see that all, the so-called perfect critics who knew the game were totally wrong about me as a basketball player being able to adjust to a certain system, and yet still as a team we can evolve and become a championship team in the city of Chicago. So I mean, all those frustrations and those expectations that the fans or that the sports writers had about me as a person and about this organization was put to rest, and that was a gratifying feeling.
I was probably most happy for Michael in the sense that I knew him a long time, and you knew that he was going to be judged on winning, and it became Michael trusting others that eventually got us to win. And the reason he began to trust was Phil's influence. He'd gone from, being a great player to being a great team player and a great champion.
Pero detrás de esa gloria también comenzaba a gestarse un nuevo conflicto, uno mucho más silencioso y peligroso, el precio de ser el mejor. Y Phil Jackson, fiel a su estilo, tenía preparado el próximo movimiento para empujar a Jordan aún más allá de sus propios límites. Tras conquistar su primer anillo, el aura de perfección que rodeaba a Michael Jordan se quebró de forma inesperada. En 1991, el periodista Sam Smith publicó The Jordan Rules, un libro explosivo que sacudió los cimientos del vestuario de los Bulls. En sus páginas, el mundo conoció al verdadero Jordan detrás del ídolo, un competidor implacable, obsesionado con ganar, pero también capaz de humillar y dominar psicológicamente a sus propios compañeros en cada práctica.
It was received. Jordan didn't like it, and I understand. And I don't know for sure, but I've always believed he never read it. And what I knew what he didn't like, and I understood that, is the depiction of it. That he was depicted as, mean-spirited and tough on his teammates, and made fun of him, wouldn't let Horace Grant eat on the plane coming back from a playoff game, said he didn't play well enough, and got him a fight with Will Perdue and called him Will Vanderbilt because it was, he went to Vanderbilt and he said Purdue is a Big Ten, they're better than Vanderbilt. Yeah, and what happened, I'm sure you saw and many of your viewers saw the Last Dance documentary, and people ask me about that. What I really liked about it, and maybe it was a little selfish, is that, Jordan finally sort of copped to who he was.
Lo que para muchos era liderazgo, para otros era tiranía pura. El ambiente de los entrenamientos se describía como una guerra diaria bajo el mandato de un emperador despiadado. En un principio, las miradas apuntaron a Horace Grant como la principal fuente de la información, pero con el paso del tiempo se revelaría un giro inesperado. Uno de los principales filtradores había sido el propio Phil Jackson. Lo que parecía una traición fue, en realidad, un acto deliberado. Jackson entendía que, para que Jordan creciera como líder, tenía que enfrentarse a su reflejo más incómodo. Exponerlo públicamente a la crítica fue su forma de obligarlo a evolucionar y controlar su entorno desde otra dimensión. Y mientras el caos mediático rodeaba al equipo, los Bulls no se detenían. En 1992, regresaron a las finales, esta vez ante los Trail Blazers de Clyde Drexler. En los días previos de las finales, la prensa comenzó a comparar a la estrella de los Blazers con MJ por sus similitudes en sus estilos de juego, algo que sacó de quicio a Jordan.
Clyde was a threat. I'm not saying he wasn't a threat, but me being compared to him, I took offense to that.
En el juego 1, MJ salió encendido. Anotó 35 puntos solo en la primera mitad, incluyendo una lluvia de triples desde todos los ángulos.
Blazers get back. Pippen back for Jordan again for three. And the first. Jordan eluding Robinson. Yes! 18 from Michael Jordan.
He just tricked Cliff Robinson, went right up. He's in his groove right now. He built.
Jordan used the post up to his advantage. Jordan for three.
We're like, I'm killing this dude.
I wanted people to know the difference between me and Clyde. It was always a comparison.
Yes.
And I didn't want it to be a comparison. I wanted it to be totally different. I wanted people to see that on the highest stage.
Su gran actuación lo coronó con su icónico encogimiento de hombros, como si dijera, ni yo me lo creo.
Did you see that look? Michael indicating he can't believe it.
35 points, first game in the first half, making everything. That game. Everybody does that now. Got to make a shot now. He's doing that. The same thing. They don't understand. The man had 35 points when he was doing this, not 2 shots that went in the basket. So it's like, I've seen so many people try to do the same thing. Now, I don't know what I'm doing. I just made 2 baskets. The man had 35 points.
I had nothing else to do but that. I mean, when I said that, look, it's like I'm not in control here. It's like somebody's in my body and I'm making shots all over the place. So, what else can you do?
La victoria fue contundente y los Bulls sellaron el título en 6 partidos. La temporada de 1993 traía una meta aún más desafiante, lograr el three-peat, algo que ningún equipo había conseguido desde los Celtics de Bill Russell. Sin embargo, el desgaste emocional empezaba a cobrar factura. Las críticas por sus supuestas adicciones al juego, los rumores constantes, el escrutinio mediático y el eco persistente del libro de Sam Smith empujaban a Jordan al borde del abismo. Phil Jackson, una vez más, supo leer la situación. Sabía que Jordan necesitaba un nuevo ancla emocional, un motivo profundo para seguir compitiendo.
This is something that we talked about a lot as a basketball team, is about how to be in the moment, being able to visualize what might happen in those times. Michael so embraced this, and I think that was the beauty of his game, is that he had all these abilities to adjust, not force his own predetermined idea, but allow those things to come together for his game.
I think Phil had a lot to do with that, with his Zen practice, his whole emotional approach to a game of basketball. I've experienced a lot of different coaches, but he gave me the understanding about life in a whole different frame. I think his teachings, or the understanding of Zen Buddhism, is how you view yourself to deal with the realities of life surrounding you, and somehow be able to correlate that to a simple game as basketball.
Ese combustible apareció en forma de desafío: derrotar a Charles Barkley, MVP de esa temporada y líder de los Phoenix Suns.
I was a little bit upset that I didn't get the MVP that year and they gave it to Charles Barkley. But with that said, okay, fine, you can have that. I'm gonna get this.
Jordan canalizó su furia y los Bulls vencieron en 6 juegos, logrando el tan ansiado tercer título consecutivo. Pero la gloria se desvanecería pronto. En el verano de 1993, Michael recibió el golpe más devastador de su vida: el asesinato de su padre, James Jordan. Una pérdida que no solo lo marcó, lo vació por dentro. Y en ese vacío, Phil Jackson percibió algo más que dolor. Vio la señal de que su estrella estaba al límite y que lo que venía a continuación no sería solo una pausa deportiva, sino una grieta emocional que cambiaría el rumbo de la franquicia y su relación para siempre. A medida que se acercaba el inicio del campamento de entrenamiento de los Bulls en el otoño de 1993, algo inusual flotaba en el ambiente. Michael Jordan, desgastado física y emocionalmente, ya había tomado una decisión. Quería alejarse del baloncesto. Lo comunicó a través de su agente, David Falk, al dueño del equipo, Jerry Reinsdorf. Este, sorprendido por la noticia, le pidió un último gesto: que antes de anunciar nada, hablara primero con Phil Jackson.
Jerry Reinsdorf called me and said, Michael's considering not playing basketball this season. I said, what? That doesn't make any sense. He said, no, he's considering not playing, but I told him he has to talk to you before, he can make that decision, because you're probably the only guy that can talk him out of it. And I said, well, far be it from me to talk him out of something. I've never really been able to talk Michael into doing anything. He does everything just about on his own whim.
Pero Jordan tenía dudas. Conocía demasiado bien a su entrenador. Sabía que Phil tenía la habilidad de meterse en la cabeza de las personas y tocarles las fibras más sensibles.
And Michael showed up and we sat in the chairman's office and talked about it. And he basically said, I just lost the desire to play. I just can't summon up the energy to go out and play. And I said, you have to understand that your decision, but you're depriving so many people who enjoy this sport the opportunity of such a great amount of pleasure. This is something that you may have to think about for a while. No, he said, I'm pretty much determined that this is it. I'm gonna step back.
Aún así, se reunieron. En ese encuentro íntimo, Jordan le preguntó con franqueza si aún quedaba algún desafío por conquistar, y Jackson no tuvo una respuesta a eso.
Phil tried to talk me out of it. He actually gave me a lot of things to think about, and I gave him one. I said, if you can give me one challenge that I can look forward to this season, that could motivate me, then certainly I could change my thought. And he tried one in terms of just being God-gifted talent, and you're depriving a lot of people of an opportunity to enjoy that, and that really wasn't enough for me to push myself into the next season, and I didn't really have the sense of motivation. And it was a great career at the time, and I felt when I walked away that was it.
It really needed it, and it was a good decision. But it cost the White Sox.
El 6 de octubre de 1993, Michael Jordan anunció su retiro del baloncesto profesional, dejando perplejo al mundo entero. Las teorías no tardaron en surgir, desde el impacto emocional por la muerte de su padre, hasta rumores sobre castigos encubiertos por sus apuestas. Lo cierto es que se marchó, y con su ausencia se abría una nueva etapa de incertidumbre para los Bulls. Phil Jackson, ahora sin su máxima estrella, tomó el control total del equipo. En teoría, Scottie Pippen era era quien debía liderar, pero en la práctica, sus inseguridades, sumadas a los conflictos contractuales con la gerencia, lo debilitaban ante la presión. El momento más controversial llegó en los playoffs de 1994 contra los Knicks. Con el partido empatado y solo segundos en el reloj, Phil tomó una decisión tajante. El tiro final lo haría Tony Kukoc. Pippen, herido en su orgullo, se negó a entrar a la cancha. Aquel gesto dejó una cicatriz profunda que nunca sanaría. Décadas después, en su autobiografía Unguarded, publicada en 2021, Pippen fue más allá. Acusó abiertamente a Jackson de actuar con motivaciones racistas. Una declaración que, más que explicar el pasado, evidenció que el dolor de aquella jugada seguía tan vivo como el primer día. Pero en medio de ese vacío, cuando todo parecía fragmentarse, una frase bastó para encender nuevamente la llama. 2 palabras, un fax, y el mensaje más esperado por toda una generación. El 18 de marzo de 1995, el mundo recibió un mensaje tan simple como poderoso. Estoy de vuelta. Con esas 2 palabras, Michael Jordan regresaba a la NBA tras casi 2 años de ausencia. Las expectativas eran monumentales. Se creía que su sola presencia bastaría para llevar nuevamente a los Bulls hasta la cima. Pero el baloncesto no perdona, y en las semifinales de conferencia, los Orlando Magic de Shaquille O'Neal y Penny Hardaway frenaron en seco el sueño del regreso perfecto. Phil Jackson lo entendió rápido. El equipo necesitaba algo más. En la temporada 95-96, los Bulls sumaron una pieza tan impredecible como clave, Dennis Rodman. El gusano venía con un historial cargado de polémicas y con una relación tensa con Jordan y Pippen desde la época de los Bad Boys, por lo que Phil jugaría un rol clave para lograr la bendición tanto de Scottie como de MJ.
Do you remember your first meeting with Rodman?
Oh, it was awful. I walk into Jerry Krause's house. He's sitting on the couch. He's got a po' boy hat over his eyes. He's got the rings in his nose and his mouth. And he doesn't stand up to meet me. So I said, stand up, Dennis. Take your hat off, shake hands. Let's go outside and talk.
We had to break bread then at the house. So basically said, Dennis, you want to come play for the Bulls? I said, I don't care. Whatever. What's up?
Jordan, Pippen y Phil Jackson dieron el visto bueno. Así, el jugador más rebelde de la liga aterrizaba en el equipo más disciplinado del momento.
Wayne, we would never made the move without checking first with Scottie and Michael. And even though, Jerry had left the decision up to me, and he had entertained the thought, and I put down on paper 7 guys I thought could help us out. He was the 7th at the bottom of that list, simply because of what he brings with him, his on the court and off the court behavior. He was probably the perfect person to come in that position, regardless of his thing. We knew that we're a professional enough group of guys that we could handle a distraction or a personality like Dennis's and incorporate him into our team. But we checked first with Scottie. Scottie said, hey, if you feel like you can coach him, so be it. Michael said, hey, this guy brings a lot of baggage. Same thing. Do you think he can run what we got to run, and he'll be able to do what we want him to do offensively? It's fine with me because you got to deal with him, and that's true.
He felt dedicated to fit in. I saw him in the summer, and I played a couple of pickup games when I was out in L.A., and he was very eager to be a part of a championship team again. He'd just come from San Antonio, where they've kind of put a bad label on him, and he never really felt like a winner with that team. And coming to Chicago, he wanted to get that attitude back. And as Phil's mentioned, I said, I think he can fit, but you have to coach him. If you feel like he's coachable, then we as players could forget about what he's done to us in the past and think about what our opportunities are in the future, and that's where we approach them.
Con Rodman subido a bordo, los Bulls harían historia. 72 victorias con solo 10 derrotas y un campeonato ganado ante los Seattle Supersonics. Pero mientras el equipo brillaba en la cancha, se desataba una tormenta tras bambalinas. Jerry Krause, gerente general de los Bulls, descubrió lo que sospechaba desde hacía tiempo. Phil Jackson había sido la fuente principal detrás del explosivo libro The Jordan Rules. La relación entre ambos colapsó. Phil comprendió que la figura de Krause era vista con rechazo en el vestuario, especialmente por Michael y Scottie.
Phil was the ringleader, and that was the most amazing thing to me about Phil, was how he was able to get these superstar players to side with him and create these perceived battles between the players and management.
Jordan had a personal animus for Krause that was almost contemptible, and that boiled over into a friction between players and the general manager that shouldn't have been there, didn't need to be there.
Y lo entendió tan bien que lo convirtió en parte de su estrategia. Krause se transformó en el villano necesario, una figura externa a la que todos podían culpar, una amenaza constante que mantenía al grupo cohesionado, una narrativa invisible pero poderosa. Nosotros contra él.
Phil was motivating the team, and it's a great point, and it was the players against management, and it worked.
He knew how much power he had. He knew that no matter pretty much whatever he did, that he wouldn't be looked at as the bad guy. Jerry Krause and Jerry Reinsdorf would be looked at as the bad guys. And he took advantage of that power.
Phil, lejos de retractarse, utilizó el conflicto como una palanca interna. Convirtió a la gerencia en el enemigo común, consolidando así su dominio sobre el vestuario, especialmente sobre Jordan, que encontró en Krause un nuevo blanco para canalizar su rabia. Con el paso del tiempo, Jordan empezó a entender que Phil no era solo un estratega táctico, era un maestro del ajedrez psicológico. Cada palabra, cada silencio, cada confrontación tenía un propósito. Jackson sabía cómo moldear el enfoque mental de Jordan para potenciarlo en los momentos clave.
Phil always did crossword puzzles for years and years. They'd always have the New York Times crossword puzzle out. And Michael used to sort of mock that. And Michael was a new age young guy. All the books Phil would always talk about, and he'd give the players on the road. Michael never read the books. But in the end, Michael was reading the books. He was playing crossword puzzles. He had so understood and so respected what Phil Jackson had done that he had began to mimic and copy some of the things and talk about, as you would hear things that Phil said, and all of a sudden Michael would be sounding like Phil, and Michael never sounded like Phil at the beginning, I'll tell you that.
I understood his belief, I understood his focus.
You got it, Dennis. That's enough now, that's enough.
And at times he talked through me.
Come on, keep your head. Keep your head. Hey, you do it in the final. Let's go, keep your head, everybody get together.
I could exert some leadership from a player standpoint, which I did.
Su control del vestuario, capaz de equilibrar egos tan explosivos como los de Rodman, Pippen y MJ, fue fundamental para alcanzar el segundo three-peat.
It became more of a mental thing with him. Here you got a guy, myself, who day in and day out, living and breathing the game of basketball, to a guy, Scotty, who got his own different personality, to a guy who was totally off the wall. That's his strength of his coaching.
To be able to deal with each one individually rather than...
And get them all
the best of everybody.
Focused on the same goal.
En las finales de 1997, ante el Utah Jazz, se vivió uno de los momentos más icónicos de esa era. Jordan, como tantas veces, cargó con todo. Anotó el buzzer beater del primer juego para darle la victoria a Chicago. El estadio explotó. Pero en medio de la celebración, Phil Jackson no se inmutó, como si supiera, incluso antes de que el balón tocara la red, que el partido ya estaba decidido. Sin embargo, mientras los Bulls dominaban el presente, el futuro ya comenzaba a resquebrajarse. La tensión entre Phil Jackson y Jerry Krause estaba a punto de explotar, y lo que vino después no fue una temporada más. Fue el capítulo final de la dinastía, el último baile. A pesar de tener 2 campeonatos consecutivos en el bolsillo, el ambiente en Chicago estaba lejos de ser estable. La relación entre Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen y Phil Jackson con el gerente general Jerry Krause se había deteriorado al límite. Todo indicaba que la dinastía estaba colgando de un hilo. Krause, en su afán de reestructurar el equipo, estaba dispuesto a cortar incluso lo más sagrado. Tras arduas negociaciones, Phil Jackson accedió a regresar por una última temporada, firmando por $6 millones. Pero tan pronto estampó su firma, Krause hizo unas declaraciones que encendieron la mecha definitiva.
This will be Phil's last year as the coach of the Bulls. At the conclusion of the year, we'll look towards the future.
No había espacio para interpretaciones. Krause no solo decidía el fin, lo anunciaba con frialdad, incluso antes de que comenzara la temporada.
Jerry Krause and I were, really having difficulties working together. Jerry really wanted me out, and he wanted to start over again and to begin anew.
If Phil's not back, then certainly I'm not back. So, it doesn't leave me with any other choices but not to play next year.
There's absolutely no room at all for you coming back under any other circumstances?
No, none. None at all.
Y como si fuera poco, un gesto simbólico terminó de encender todas las alarmas. En la boda de su hija, Krause invitó a todo el equipo menos a Phil Jackson. Incluso Tim Floyd, un entrenador universitario sin experiencia NBA, estuvo presente. Los rumores de que sería el sucesor de Phil ya circulaban desde hacía meses. A ojos de todos, esa no fue solo una omisión, fue un mensaje.
Jerry Krause thought that the only way he could preserve any kind of place in history was to build a team from scratch, without Phil Jackson, without Michael Jordan.
Un desaire personal que dejó claro que, para Krause, la era Jackson ya estaba muerta, aunque aún faltara una última batalla por librar. La dinastía aún no había caído. Ante este panorama, Phil nombraría la temporada de 1997-98 como el último baile.
And I hand out the beginning of the season. I put in Roman numeral 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, The Last Dance. Now there's a question mark behind it in this.
He knew it was the last minute for him. So when he said last dance, although we bought into it, it was somewhere deep inside this little corner. I'm saying, nah, this is not it. We're going to win everything, and then everybody's going to be okay.
Our first meeting back in the summer, Phil passed out our handbooks for the year. And on the cover, there it was, The Last Dance. And to think that this is the last season being together is a pretty heavy thing to think about.
You know, I think we all knew going into that last season that was the end. So no one really screwed it up. It was going to be screwed up at the end, and we just have to accept that.
Phil y Michael sabían lo que significaba. Esta vez no era solo una temporada más, era el cierre definitivo. Y si iban a marcharse, lo harían por todo lo alto. El guión fue perfecto.
Michael flat out said at the end of his career, I'm not going to play for any other coach. And to me, the greatest player in any sport that I've ever seen, for him to say that, what an amazing, remarkable relationship.
Phil Jackson understood people. And, you know, you can talk about X's and O's, you talk about defense, offense, and all of those things that come with being a great coach. And yes, he was that. But Phil Jackson understood people, and in particular, he understood Michael Jordan. He understood the needs. He understood what it took to coach a player like a Michael Jordan. And more importantly, Michael Jordan had his trust in knowing that he was always going to make sure that he placed Michael Jordan in a position to win. So when it came to preparation for the game and what Michael Jordan was all about, Phil Jackson was the perfect complement to him. And I just think they worked together. And Phil went on to do that not only in Chicago, but he did it in LA as well. And he had a phenomenal understanding of people and people who were driven. You know, I don't know if Phil was a phenomenal motivator, but certainly Phil knew how to coach and win with talented players, and he did that over and over again. And I think Michael acknowledged that, understood that, respected that, and I think that was the most comfortable thing for him.
El escenario, las finales de 1998 ante el Utah Jazz. El clímax, Jordan robando el balón, avanzando lentamente hacia la línea de tiros libres, dejando atrás a Bryon Russell y ejecutando The Last Shot.
Chicago with the lead.
El sexto anillo quedó sellado. El abrazo entre MJ y Phil al final del partido fue más que un gesto deportivo. Fue un adiós contenido, la despedida de un viaje irrepetible.
I never gave up. Every time we were close, I knew we were going to do it. I knew it.
The lasting thing that I think about Phil was we grew a trust amongst ourselves as friends, and we found that we had similar likes in terms of just our habits in some respects, and the inner peace, the moment, things of that nature I could identify with, that he was really trying to express to me.
Ese momento pudo haber sido el cierre ideal entre dos de las figuras más importantes en la historia del baloncesto. Un legado compartido, basado en títulos, respeto mutuo y una conexión casi espiritual. Pero la realidad, como suele ocurrir, fue mucho más amarga. Meses después, y según fuentes cercanas a Jordan, el impacto de la separación con Phil lo golpeó profundamente. No solo porque su mentor se marchaba, sino porque en su fuero interno, Jordan sintió que había sido manipulado hasta el final, que todo había sido una coreografía perfecta, dirigida por alguien que siempre tenía un paso por delante. Sobre todo porque Jordan movió todos los hilos posibles para que Jackson continuara. Intercedió ante el dueño Jerry Reinsdorf, buscó todas las vías, pero el maestro Zen, fiel a su estilo, se negó a volver.
Well, the fun we've had is very enticing, and believe me, there's always a temptation to do that. But enough is enough. And I have some things I want to do that I haven't done yet. And one of them is, see what this next go-around brings, see what life without basketball brings, see what it's like to take a winter vacation, and see what happens when Bill Bradley gets an opportunity to run for president.
The one person who might have been able to keep the dynasty together was Phil Jackson, because I think if Jackson had decided to come back, Jordan would have played for him.
Phil deserves some of the blame. I really believe that they would have stuck around for one more year. Jerry Reinsdorf would have brought them all back for one more year if Phil had given the word.
It was a very sad situation because never lost in the finals. I never knew what it felt like. At least if you're gonna be king of the hill,
be the king till you're not the king.
Until somebody knock you down, then you can shake the hand and say, you enjoy it. Now you're going to see how difficult it is, you know. But that never happened.
Para Jordan, esa negativa no fue una decisión profesional, fue una traición personal. El resentimiento caló tan hondo que en 2009, durante su ceremonia de ingreso al Salón de la Fama, la ausencia de Phil Jackson fue tan notoria como simbólica. El solo hecho de no estar presente fue el eco de un final agridulce para la que es, sin duda, una de las asociaciones más exitosas de la historia del deporte. Si te sorprendió lo que Phil Jackson fue capaz de hacer con Jordan, entonces prepárate, porque hay una historia aún más brutal detrás de su transformación física y mental. Tim Grover conocía los miedos más profundos de su majestad, sus límites y cómo destruirlos. Haz clic ahora y descubre los secretos del entrenador personal más temido por las estrellas de la NBA.